So as a way of doing some in a way of solving or trying to solve the issue of greenhouse gas emissions and lowering this, we there are a lot of number of actions have been made before. And one of these action, the first one is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was the first summit in Brazil in 1992. They call it as Earth Summit. So mainly the goal of this summit was they recognize that there's an increase of greenhouse gases already and concentrations in atmosphere, and the main goal is just to stabilize these greenhouse gases. There was no like specific guidelines given to any countries, but only approaches on how to stabilize greenhouse gases. And then came a time in after 5 years, the Kyoto Protocol, and this part is more and more nations are actually realizing that they need more urgent actions to further limit the greenhouse gases. So, and Kyoto Protocol, the Kyoto is in Japan in 1997. So more of the developed countries, the industrial countries, agreed to limit the greenhouse gas emissions by 5.5% compared only to 1990 levels. All right. So this is for the period of 2008 to 2012. So 5.5%. In fact, this is not that big amount of limitation. And they are also considering trading, emissions trading, which we are going to discuss in later videos about trading your emissions as well between countries. But the thing is, the other developing countries at this time are not actually required to reduce emissions. So most of the developed countries are the ones who agreed, but not those developing countries at this point in time, the 1997. That includes India, China, and other developing countries still. And over 160 countries ratified this agreement, that including USA at this point, because they thought that limiting their GSG emissions, which is basically, as I mentioned in our Kaya identity, is basically the limiting your energy GDP would also damage the economy. All right, so they did not ratify this one. Then the result of this Kyoto Protocol, mostly the industrialized nations have met their what they have agreed. But of course, it was not the growth of or the increase of global emissions was not met because only a few countries already agreed and the rest are still developing. So there's a failed to slow growth in global emissions. And then there's also Copenhagen Accord. There was no agreement on emissions targets, but still they agreed that they have to resolve to keep the temperature rise up to 2 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. See, I think the most important time would be the Paris Agreement in 2015. This was signed by 195 countries, which reaffirms the agreement previously on to keep the global temperature to below 2 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial time. So this is the reference time. It is also agreed that emissions has to be reduced as soon as possible, or a drastic reduction, because they are really feeling the climate change already at this point in time. This is an urgent case and it has to be reduced. And they have agreed to have set reduction emissions targets. So they have to have targets for each of the countries that signed this agreement. And up to the end of the century, which is about 2050 to 2100, there will be a more carbon neutrality, which is more of the natural way that carbon sinks to balance the sources of CO2 emissions. So this will return to a more normal, natural way of carbon cycle. And for Australia, we have set an ambitious target based on the Paris Agreement of about 26 to 28% below 2005 levels by 2030. So we're trying to meet this target by 2030, okay, below 2005 levels. We're actually doing a lot of things right now on improving the uptake of renewable energies, for example, in Australia. But I would say it's not that much because in fact our economy is still based on coal as our major part of economy. Although a number of power plants have been closed already in recent years, but still coal is a major part of our economy, and the government is not an easy decision for them because they have to balance economy and of course the comfort of people, and also in terms of taking care of the environment. But this needs, but the at the end of the day, the main issue still, and the main focus still is on how to successfully reduce our CO2 emissions without much damage also to our economy. And so we are going to the next video, we are going to discuss about what exactly are the energy mix in Australia, including the world as well, but more focus on what are the energy sources that we use in Australia and how do we produce them and how much percentage or each of these energy sources are available in the mix. So I'll see you in the next video.